Good morning. I'm going to show you 6 photos. 6 photos. If I could have my slides. I want you to look at these 6 photos and think about which one might be computer generated, not a real person. There we have him. Now let's put some numbers in these. Which one is fake? How many people think it's number 1? All right, number 2, number 3, number 4, always popular, number 5, number 6. Great, they're all fake. Every single one is machine generated. Speaking of AI, how many people have watched this movie? Minority Report, great. To the rest of you, I'm not going to spoil the movie, but those of you who did watch it, where did this guy work at? Do you remember? What was the name of the police force where he worked? Pre-crime, exactly, pre-crime. And pre-crime was a police force that would look at a person and say, I think you're going to commit a crime in the future, so I'm going to arrest you today. A group of Chinese researchers watched the movie. They liked it. Like, pretty cool. Why don't we try that? So they fed one AI 1,891 images of criminals and non-criminals. Top 3 are examples of criminals, bottom 3 are examples of non-criminals. By the end of this training process, the AI could look at a single image of a person and predict criminality with 89.5% accuracy. I have the app on my phone. We're going to try it. We're not going to try. How many people are familiar with this brand? Care to admit publicly? All right, this is Ashley Madison. Ashley Madison. It's an online dating website for married people after they're married. Somebody's writing it down. It's ashleymadison.com. But before you sign up, let me tell you, there was a big hack. And the database was released to the public. To this day, sadly, we know that 4 men have committed suicide because their names and emails were implicated in the hack. Now, looking at the same database, we know that the ratio of active male to female users on the website was 20 million to 1,500. 20 million men for 1,500 women. Really, an aspirational website. So. Now, would those men have committed suicide if they had known? Would they have even signed up? Probably not. Probably not. How many people took a bird to the conference today? How many people choose to ride a bird today? Anybody? No? How about a unicorn? I'm, of course, referring to this company, Bird, the scooter company, which just became the fastest company to reach unicorn status. They just raised $300 million at a valuation of $2 billion. And over $1 billion, that's what we call a unicorn. They did it in 15 months only. It didn't solve cancer, but the scooters are pretty fun. The point here is that because of exponential technologies, a lot of our assumptions about how economies function, how business models operate, and how individuals optimize their choices no longer seem to hold true. We need to revisit these assumptions. I call this exponential economics or exonomics. And my wife and I are writing a book on this subject. Today, in the short time we have together, I want to share with you some of the highlights from our research. In exonomics, we talk about the 7 pillars, the 7 Ps of exonomics. We talk about people, property, production, price, power, policy, and prosperity. And I always like to point out that this is a journey that connects people to prosperity. And that's very much intentional. That is why we're here. That is the spirit of this conversation. But the part that a lot of us tend to forget is this. We live in an amazing world, right? Phenomenal technological developments. Life expectancy in the last 100 years has more than doubled. Integrated circuits are 30,000 times faster than the 1960s. Solar panels are 250 times cheaper than when they were invented. And we have DNA sequencing that is more than 100,000 times cheaper since 2001. Biotech, nanotech, and information technology are growing exponentially. Yet, despite this, we tend to forget that exponential technologies tend to create exponential winners and exponential losers, right? We can't really focus on the true power of exponential technologies. We can't unleash that power unless we're cognizant of the fact that there are exponential winners and exponential losers. Let me demonstrate. I want you to count to 10 seconds with me in your head. 10 seconds. In the last 10 seconds, Google made $17,000. Amazon made $24,000. Apple made $54,000. In those 10 seconds, more than 40,000 hours of video was watched on Netflix. In those mere 10 seconds. But there's a flip side. Let's look at the flip side. In the same 10 seconds, the average person in the world made 0.2 cents. 0.2 of a cent, of a single dollar cent. In the same 10 seconds, 19 children were born into poverty. Same 10 seconds, we threw out 418 tons of food. And in the same 10 seconds, 3 people died of starvation. Exponential winners and exponential losers. If you look at net productivity over the last 70 years, that's the blue line. Pretty steady increase. But if you look at real hourly compensation, when you adjust wages for inflation, that's the red line. Pretty stagnant over the last 40 years. This is a problem. This means that there's unequal exposure to the benefits of technology, right? Depending on what your life looks like, you're either catching the top wave or the bottom one. This gap, I'm showing you US data, but this gap, we've looked at many different countries, this gap seems to be correlated with the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality in a society. I think our concern is when economic inequality translates into genetic inequality, translates into longevity inequality. That's when we show up and we realize certain families are simply not dying because they've had early access to longevity technologies. Our collective nightmare scenario, of course, is species bifurcation. This is where humanity is going to split into subspecies, and we're going to evolve differently depending on what type of access we have had to these technologies. And there's pretty solid evidence that this is a multi-generational effect. This stays in families for a very, very long time. How many people have heard of the marshmallow effect? Great. So the marshmallow effect is where you put a marshmallow in front of a little kid and you say, don't eat it. It's a pretty straightforward experiment. Well, you say, don't eat it. Don't eat it now. Wait 15 minutes and I'll give you a second one. And the idea is, it could be understood as a measure of how delaying gratification could be a predictor of success later on in life. Now, this experiment was replicated by a team out of Stanford, and they just published their results about a month and a half ago. This time, all they did differently was that they controlled for family wealth. It turns out, once you control for family wealth, there is no marshmallow effect. Translation, it doesn't matter. If you're a rich kid, it doesn't matter if you ate the marshmallow. You'll be just fine. And now we're understanding the marshmallow effect in a very different light. Poor kids tend to go for the marshmallow immediately because they're used to lack of food safety. What does this mean? What are we doing to our families when there is this type of intergenerational effect that tends to linger for a very long time? If you look at developed countries, there's a very disruptive trend, a very disturbing trend that you can observe almost across the board. If you look at the top 10% earners and their share of national income, a very consistent trend is that right until the 1980s, we see a downward trend. But after the 1980s, it goes up very, very consistently. So the question is, what happened right there? The personal computer was invented right there. That's one exponential technology. Think about the bifurcating effect that it has had. The problem is, we think the next decade is going to be accentuated by 4 forces. We call these the 4 supremacies. We're going to see quantum supremacy, blockchain supremacy, solar supremacy, and AI supremacy. Blockchain supremacy is when blockchain architecture for a database becomes more prominent and useful than conventional database architectures. Quantum supremacy is when quantum computers become more powerful than digital computers. And by all indications, they're around the corner, 5, 6 years from now. Solar supremacy is when the marginal cost of energy goes almost all the way down to zero. And AI supremacy is when AI becomes better than humans in the vast majority of commercial applications. The point is, we're beginning to see the convergence of all these forces. We anticipate right around 2025 to be a point of convergence. And what will the world look like when you have all these technologies differentiating human societies? This is why we think the next decade is going to be remembered as what my wife and I call the Great Bifurcation. We've had Great Depression, Great Recession. We might remember the next decade as the Great Bifurcation, where human societies, organizations, and individual families were bifurcated into two groups, the exponential and the not so exponential. The first sentence of the book we're writing, I want to share with you, is this: we have written this book in the hope that its main prediction will not come true. And I want all of us to feel empowered to play a role in this, because we all have to play a role. Technology on its own will not solve all of our problems. But let's take a step back. The question you might be wondering is, how do we emerge as exponential winners? So I have 20 ideas that I want to share with you guys. Concrete, potential ideas that you could apply to your own world and emerge a winner. Number one, recognize that we're headed towards a very different world. A world that is dominated by reduction in ownership, virtualization going up, decentralization going up, and production costs dropping exponentially. In fact, the marginal cost of production in many industries is approaching zero. In this new world, the most important concept to get is that we're headed towards oversupply. Which begs the question, in a world of oversupply, how do you create value? I have 3 suggestions for you. Number one, ask yourself the following question about any product or service, whether the virtual digital connected version of it exists. If not, go build it immediately. That's an immediate business opportunity. Also, we talk about the Uberization of many different industries, the fact that people want what they want exactly when they want it. Just-in-time delivery is a new source of value. And finally, because of the fact that the marginal cost of supply has dropped so much, suddenly hyper-customization is quite feasible. So you can go after the long tail of the market, hyper-customize like never before. In this case, the 3D printed version of this guy looks better than him. I'm just pointing that out. You've decided how to create value. The next question is, how will you price it? And in order to answer that question, we've always relied on the world's most famous graph, supply-demand intersection gives us price. Not anymore. Not anymore. Thanks to the fact that the marginal cost of supply has dropped so much, suddenly the entire area under the demand curve is serviceable. Translation, you should sell your product or service for a different price point depending on who's buying it, why they're buying it, and when they're buying it. Dynamic pricing is the name of the game. It used to be you could go online and pay the same price as everybody else. Not anymore. And the nightmare scenario is when you approach a physical shelf in a grocery store. As you're reaching for the tomato, the price goes up right in front of your eyes. How annoying would that be? Dynamic pricing in the physical world. We're not used to that, but pretty soon we will see that. Let's switch gears and talk about the next pillar of economics, specifically market power. What is your source of market power? In order to answer that question, I want to review quickly the 4 types of business models that we have identified. There are 4 types of businesses you could be in. The first type of business you could be in is a content business. If you're in the content business, you don't have a lot of market power. Why? Because content has been digitized. And as such, you don't pay anything to copy that one file. The marginal cost of copying content has gone all the way to zero. So effectively, just like commodities, they're interchangeable and you don't have a lot of market power. It doesn't mean you don't make money. It simply means you don't have a lot of market power. You go up the power chain, you end up with where most of us live, a product or a service. We have more market power than a content business, but less market power than what we call a platform. What is a platform? A platform we're defining as a value bridge. A bridge connecting multiple sides of the market. Most importantly, you should resist the temptation to become one side of the market. When we work with companies who are trying to develop their platform strategy, they tend to gravitate towards building the bridge and then saying, we're this side of the market. No, you want to be a pure bridge for the flow of value. And what happens when you manage to interlock multiple platforms? Very hard to do. Many companies are trying. But to our best knowledge, only one company has truly succeeded. You end up with an ecosystem, an interlocking of multiple platforms. The company that has succeeded in creating a proper ecosystem, in our opinion, is WeChat. WeChat out of China, a very interesting business model. Let me show you the S&P 500. This is the index of the 500 largest companies in the United States. On the right-hand side, you have some of the exits, random sampling of the exits since 2002. On the left, you have some of the entries since 2002. If you look at the exits, the vast majority of these companies are product or service companies. But if you look at the entries since 2002, and again, this is a random sampling, you see many examples of platforms. You have Priceline, eBay, E-Trade, Salesforce, Netflix, Amazon, Google, and the list goes on. So platform wars are coming, and we all need a strategy. Well, let me share with you the cutting edge of our research, the 5th business type that we have identified. If you go further up the power chain, you end up with what we're calling an operating system. We've seen version 1 of operating systems. Windows was an example. In this case, we're talking about an operating system as a platform, invisible platform that operates in the background, connecting multiple technologies with multiple sides of the market. To this day, we do not have an example of an operating system business model, this version 2.0 of it. But in the next decade or so, we expect around 27 of these operating models to emerge, operating systems to emerge very, very quickly. Let me show you an operating system in practice.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. Tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
Just 67 seconds, more like a year. Yeah, this is under a minute, and it's the world record right now. So think about this. We've looked at systems that display these types of characteristics, the operating systems, and we call these exponential system dynamics. They tend to have 3 key attributes in common. These are systems that are highly adaptable, highly scalable, and highly self-manageable. These traits keep showing up. I'll talk about adaptability in a second, but think about scalability. If you wanted 10 pit stops instead of the one you have here, all you need to do is to replicate what is going on there and transplant any team member into that new environment. They'll know exactly what to do. And notice also that there are no managers in this picture. Everybody is self-managing. There's not enough time. This is why we're seeing this shift away from management towards self-management as complexity goes up. But perhaps most importantly, in this picture, and this keeps showing up again and again and again, notice that nobody is collaborating. There is absolutely no collaboration. Instead, everybody is hyper-coordinated. There's not enough time to collaborate. Instead, people are hyper-coordinated. And this is a problem because modern management science has taught us for the last 80 years or so that collaboration is the high watermark of how we should build our companies and how we should run our teams. Except as the complexity goes up, collaboration is progressively less and less feasible. We switch to coordination. Let me give you an example. How many people feel like they get too many emails today? Great. First of all, keep those hands up. Everybody else, stop emailing these people. That's a good place to start. There we go. Yeah, you're welcome. I think we're going to look back at email as a form of collaborative communication. That's why there's so much latent demand for coordinated communication. Platforms like Slack, that is the latent demand that they're addressing. And I think every exponential system will go through this transition from collaboration towards coordination. In the collaboration zone, you're very vulnerable. We've looked at airline accidents. It turns out 73% of airline accidents happen on the first day of a team working together, of a flight crew working together. They're completely in the collaboration zone. But how do you move that towards coordination? Most teams move in that direction gradually. The point is to expedite it. And you might ask, collaboration is the key anchor of teamwork. If you ask people anonymously, 76% of people they actually prefer working alone to working in teams. 76%. And this is a problem. I think it highlights the challenge with collaboration and the opportunity for coordination. But what does an operating system business model look like? To demonstrate, I want to show you this video. This is from Project YOLO. YOLO stands for You Only Look Once. This is a type of AI that only looks at a video once. It's already been pre-trained to detect objects in a video. In this case, it's detecting a person and a motorbike. It's doing it automatically. Let's have a look. So right off the bat, it's pretty clear that this rate of object detection is faster than the human brain can handle, right? So AI supremacy in this domain has already been established. But I want you to think about this world. What type of transactions could be happening? Nanotransactions could be happening. If you combine this level of AI with the blockchain, with IoT, let me pause right here. Picture this world and ask yourself what type of nanotransactions could be happening. She just fired her, and this is in Turkey, she just fired her gun, so immediately her gun license fee went up by about 15% in real time. This happened in real time. The guy's jumping over the bridge, so before hitting the ground, an ambulance is already called. A health claim has already been made, it's already settled. All these people in line of fire, their lives have been endangered, so they have sued her agency. The lawsuit is settled automatically, the money is already in their accounts. They're all enrolled in therapy. It starts next Thursday. Insurance premiums for that yellow car just went up by about 10%. Real estate in this whole neighborhood just dropped by about 20%. And all of this happened in real time. It sounds like science fiction to us today, but in the next decade, this is the world we're headed towards. This is what we're anticipating. And we believe this is the beginning of what we call BlakeNet. We've given this name to the phenomenon. BlakeNet stands for blockchain, AI, and quantum. We think these three supremacies are going to combine forces to give us a world that's going to create accountability via the blockchain, automation via AI, and optimization at levels we have never seen before using quantum computers. The name might not stick, but the concept of BlakeNet we think is so disruptive. It is going to do to the internet what the internet did to the library. And I want you to ask yourself, how will you play in a world of not the internet, but the BlakeNet? Are you prepared? And in this new world, as disruptive technological change shows up, the vast majority of us gravitate towards IQ. We surround ourselves with very smart people. We build very intelligent teams. But here's a problem. Research has shown that beyond the first 2 years on the job, IQ does not seem to predict success. Let me say that again. IQ does not seem to be predicting success. So what are we missing? With a group of researchers at T-Labs, we've developed the concept of AQ for adaptability quotient. If the world is changing exponentially fast, then your ability to respond to change is the strongest predictor of your success. And we believe in a stack model of intelligence. IQ still matters. On top of that, you have EQ for emotional intelligence. On top of that, you have AQ. I want to share a couple of anecdotes from our research. We bring people into the lab, and we're trying to develop a psychometric tool to quantify their adaptability. As we bring people in, we say, welcome, today we're going to measure your adaptability. What do you think happens? They start behaving more adaptively, which is very annoying because we're trying to quantify it. But I think it's fantastic news for humanity. It means that unlike IQ, AQ seems to be highly coachable. Highly coachable. It's fantastic news. We've talked to many individuals, many teams, many organizations. The pattern that emerges in this line of research is that everybody is searching for stability. But I think the strongest predictor of how much stability you will enjoy is your ability to unlearn. Unlearning is emerging as a new core competency. And the problem is we've never really been taught how to unlearn. If you don't unlearn, your past success will get in the way of your future success. I always say I've never done anything well that I hadn't done badly first. I think the leadership moment for all of us is to create a safe environment where people can get the badly done first out of the way. Create a safe environment for unlearning. A lot of our organizations have structural violence against unlearning. But let's zoom out for a second and try to summarize 10,000 years of economic history on one slide. Very ambitious. Well, let's give it a shot. I think it's about adding certainty to an uncertain world. Every economic system in human history has rewarded those who have added certainty against the backdrop of uncertainty. And in our world, I think there's no better measure of certainty than this. For the first time in human history, extreme poverty levels, that's the black line, have fallen below 20%. This is fantastic news, but it's a little too slow for my taste. In reality, in addition to this, something else is happening. It is true, the poor are better off, but in reality, the rich are getting mega rich. This might not seem like a problem, but the truth is, absolute poverty is going down, but relative poverty is going up. And we do not handle relative poverty very well. We have a problem with this. Let me give you an example of this. You probably had the experience of walking through an airplane. As you're going to your economy seat, you had to walk past the business class, right? Some of you have seen that. There was a study. They noticed that this, and this is not always the case. Sometimes you don't have to walk through business class. But in flights where people had to do that to get to their economy seat, the number of air rage incidents goes up by 218%. Think about that. We don't handle it well. Relative poverty is a problem. And there is a history lesson in all of this. Throughout human history, we have never overcome extreme economic inequality without violence. Hopefully this time around will be different, because otherwise this doesn't look very promising. If I describe a world where there's exponential technological change, international migrations, and globalization, you might think I'm describing 2018. But in reality, 1908 looked just like this. The automobile, electricity, their world was changing exponentially fast. Borders were quite fluid, lots of migration. Now, those guys sleepwalked into 2 world wars. Are we going to be different? Are we going to prevent this type of tragedy? I think it's up to all of us. Right around here, I like to check in with everybody to see how you're all feeling. How many people feel like this? Wow, that's it? So the rest of you kind of feel like this? Yeah. Good. Good. Keep both versions alive. Let them fuel your actions. The narrative around technology is not simple. We can't be optimistic or pessimistic. We need to strike a balance. If you do manage to survive disruption or disrupt yourself, there are a few things we can say about the future of your organization. Most likely, in a post-disruptive world for your entity, you'll be managing fewer people but more information, fewer products and services offered but more platforms. Chances are you will be a platform as many products and services get commoditized. Lower stability, but that is okay because you'll have higher revenue and higher impact potential. What about your growth thesis? Where does growth come from? I think every organization needs to have a chief adaptability officer. You don't need to call them a CAO, but too much is changing for you to leave the organization's response to the change to chance. You need somebody who's intentional about noticing the change, making sense of the change for the organization, and also operationalizing a response to change. You need to have an operating system strategy. This is going to become very urgent in the next decade. And also, most of us tend to overestimate the cost of running experiments in domains that are outside of our own. And we're underestimating how quickly disruptive technologies and innovations from these outside domains could come in and destroy our business models. I always say the easiest way to think outside the box is to not know where the box is. Play outside your field. You have a competitive advantage in doing that. I want to give you this final example of a high AQ scenario. Here's the scenario. You are the owner of a theater company in Spain, and Spain has not been doing very well in recent years, so the government decided to increase taxes for theatrical shows from 8% to 21%. You wake up, you see this paper, and suddenly you realize that nobody is going to show up to your comedy show. What do you do? I want you to think about this. You have two options. You could either feel victimized or exponentially empowered. What would you do? Think about it for a second. Let me show you what they did.
Pay per laugh, the first comedy shows where you only pay for what you consume. We fitted each seat with a facial recognition system that detects the smile and proposed the following deal to spectators. Entrance will be totally free. If the show produces no laughs, you don't pay anything. However, if you laugh, you have to pay for each smile. Each smile produced is worth 30 euro cents, something that in this day and age is quite a reasonable price. At the end of the show, the spectator could check their laughter account before paying and even share it on social networks. And so that no one would cry for having laughed more than they could afford, the maximum amount to pay was 80 laughs for 24 euros. The average price of the ticket increased by 6 euros. The system was covered by the main national media outlets, and this produced 35% more spectators. Each pay-per-laugh show produced 28,000 euros more ticket money than was normally taken. Currently, the system is being copied in other theatres in Spain. A mobile phone app was created as a system of payment, and the first season ticket was launched for the number of laughs not shown.
Right? If you want to go to a comedy show, what is your biggest risk? What if it's not funny? Right? How do you de-risk your value proposition in an exponential way? I think the question is, what is your pay-per-laugh model? And now is the time to think about this. Now is the time to reflect on your own pay-per-laugh model. How do you create extreme value? How do you over-deliver? And as you reflect on this question, I want to be very clear. There's a 10% approach and a 10x approach. 10% involves reflecting on process improvement, cost reduction, digitization, all of which are valid. But I'm encouraging you to go beyond that. Think about the 10x version. And I think the 10x version could be summarized as delighting your customer. I'm not sure where the rest of you is. Oh, there we go. Delighting your customer. That is what you need to do. As an economist, it is very uncool for me to end on a positive note. So I'm going to address that. No, the truth is I'm very optimistic. I'm not an optimist, but I am optimistic. I think the best is yet to come, and we have an amazing world ahead of us, especially if our conversation includes narratives around exponential winning and exponential losing. We need to get there together. My team's prediction is that by 2030, every country on the planet will have had a public debate about universal basic income, for instance. Where they land on that debate is very unpredictable, but we need to get there together. The urgency of this question is going to accelerate. But overall, I think the most important thing to worry about is this. There's one area that I'm concerned about, and that is a crisis of imagination. A crisis of imagination. The truth is, our reach exceeds our imagination because of these technologies. You can do so much more than you realize. Most of us don't realize it. Today, the biggest risk is not thinking big enough. Not thinking big enough. Okay. And I want to leave you with my favorite quote that, for me, is a beacon of guidance as we attempt to solve these difficult problems. Intelligence is hitting a target that nobody else can. Genius is hitting a target that nobody else can see. Recognize that when you go out there and when you think bigger, for a while people are not going to recognize what type of target you're trying to hit. It will feel lonely, but that's okay. If you stay with it, soon they will realize it. All right, all the best. Thank you, everybody.